If you were the judge, what sentence would you give a father who shredded his daughter's full-ride Harvard scholarship, $328,000, because he believed girls don't deserve education? He fed the acceptance letter through a paper shredder while she watched. Girls don't need degrees, he said. They need husbands. She didn't cry. She made one phone call. 18 days later, at his own father's 80th birthday party, in front of 87 guests, every business partner he'd spent 30 years impressing, he learned that the man who built everything can also take it all away. Hi everyone. My name is Acacia Gilbert. I was 18 when my father destroyed my future, and 18 when my grandfather destroyed his. This is the story of a $12 million lesson in consequences. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. Let me tell you about the Gilbert family dinner table. Every Sunday at 6 o'clock sharp, we gathered in the formal dining room of the guest house on my grandfather's estate in Hartford, Connecticut. My father sat at the head, always, even though it was technically Grandpa Harold's property. My mother Susan sat to his right, silent unless spoken to. My brothers Marcus and Tyler flanked the other side, and I sat at the far end, closest to the kitchen. Closest to the kitchen because someone had to serve. My father, Richard Gilbert, was the CEO of Gilbert Motors, 6 dealerships across Connecticut, $47 million in annual revenue. He never let anyone forget it. Every conversation somehow circled back to the business, to his decisions, to his vision. Never mind that Grandpa Harold had built the company from a single garage in 1968. In my father's telling, he was the architect of everything. Marcus, how's the Farmington location performing? He'd ask my oldest brother, who managed one of the dealerships, poorly, from what I overheard, though Dad always cleaned up his messes. Tyler, have you decided on a major yet? He'd ask my other brother, who was in his 5th year of college, his 3rd major, still funded without question. And me? Acacia, is the roast ready? That was the extent of his interest in my life. Not my 4.0 GPA, not my position as captain of the debate team, not the 400 hours I'd logged at Hartford Hospital, holding the hands of patients who had no one else. The previous spring, I'd won the Connecticut State Debate Championship. My father didn't attend. When I showed him the trophy, he glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds. "That's nice," he said. "What's for dinner?" In the Gilbert household, there was an unwritten rule everyone understood. Gilbert men speak. Gilbert women listen. I was about to break that rule in ways none of them could imagine. The first time I truly understood my place in the family hierarchy was September 2023. 7 months before everything changed. My father called a family meeting, rare enough that we all knew it meant money. We gathered in the living room while he stood by the fireplace like a general addressing troops. "Marcus," he announced, "you've been doing solid work at Farmington. I'm giving you $15,000 for a new car, something that represents the Gilbert name." Marcus grinned. His solid work had included 3 customer complaints and a mishandled inventory order that cost the company $40,000. Dad had fixed it quietly. "Tyler," my father turned to my other brother. "I know this semester's been rough with the major change. Don't worry about the tuition. 52,000, it's handled." 5th year, 3rd major, no questions asked. Then silence. I waited. Surely he'd mentioned something about college applications. I was a senior after all. The deadlines were approaching. I'd been researching financial aid, scholarships, anything that might help since I knew better than to expect a blank check. "Dad," I finally said, "I wanted to talk about my college applications. The fees are coming up and I was wondering—" He cut me off without looking at me. "Girls don't need college, Acacia. I've already spoken with Bill Morrison. His son is looking to settle down. Good family, good business connections." Bill Morrison's son was 28, unemployed, and had been finding himself since high school. I'd met him once at a company picnic. He'd spent the entire conversation staring at my chest. "But Dad, The discussion is over." He turned to my mother. "Susan, what time is dinner?" My mother looked at her plate. She didn't say a word. That night, I applied to Harvard in secret. The $85 application fee came from my savings, money I'd earned tutoring middle schoolers in math. If my father wouldn't invest in my future, I'd invest in it myself. November 2023. A letter arrived that changed everything, though no one in my family knew it yet. I checked the mailbox before anyone else that day, a habit I'd developed since submitting my applications. The envelope was thin, which usually meant rejection. But the return address made my hands shake. Harvard College, Office of Admissions. I tore it open in the driveway, heart pounding. Dear Ms. Gilbert, based on your exceptional PSAT scores and academic record, we strongly encourage you to apply for early action admission. Students with your profile are exactly what Harvard seeks. It wasn't an acceptance. It was something almost better, an invitation. Harvard had noticed me. Harvard wanted me to apply. I read the letter 3 times, memorizing every word. Then I folded it carefully and slid it into my backpack. My father would never see it. That night, I started working on my application essay. The only place in our house with a lock was the bathroom, so that's where I wrote. Sitting on the cold tile floor at midnight, laptop balanced on my knees, trying to articulate 18 years of silence into 500 words. I learned to speak by learning when not to, I wrote. In my family, girls are seen, not heard. This essay is the first time I've truly used my voice. My English teacher, Mrs. Patterson, agreed to write my recommendation letter. She was the only adult who knew about my applications. Acacia, she said when I asked her, you have more potential than any student I've taught in 23 years. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. She handed me her letter in a sealed envelope. I never read it, but I saw her eyes when she gave it to me, fierce, almost angry on my behalf. I submitted my Harvard application on November 15, 2023, at 11:47 p.m., using the school library's computer so it wouldn't show up in our home internet history. Then I waited, and I prayed my father would never find out. Every Sunday afternoon before the family dinner I dreaded, I spent 2 hours with the person I loved most in the world. Grandpa Harold lived in the main house of Gilbert Estate, a beautiful colonial that had been in the family since he bought it in 1972. My parents and brothers and I lived in the guest house on the same property, close enough to be convenient, far enough for my father to pretend he was independent. Grandpa had macular degeneration, which made reading difficult. So every week, I'd sit in his study and read to him newspapers, business journals, sometimes novels. He said my voice was soothing. I think he just liked the company. Tell me about school, he'd say, and unlike my father, he actually listened to the answers. I told him about debate tournaments, about my college essay, about the Harvard letter, though I swore him to secrecy. Your father doesn't know? He asked, his cloudy eyes sharp despite their condition. He'd destroy it, I said. He wants me to marry Bill Morrison's son. Grandpa was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I didn't understand at the time. Acacia, when I established the family trust in 1978, I included a provision. The beneficiaries can be changed at any time, as long as I'm alive. He paused. I've always believed that legacy should go to those who deserve it, not those who simply expect it. I nodded, unsure why he was telling me this. Your father has been the primary beneficiary for 30 years, he continued. 70% of $12 million. But nothing is set in stone. Grandpa, I don't... He held up a hand. Just remember what I said. When the time comes, you'll understand. I didn't understand. Not then. But I would. Very soon. March 28th, 2024. 4:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I looked at my phone right before I opened the mailbox. I was checking for a text from my study group, but what I found in that metal box made me forget everything else. The envelope was thick. In college admissions, thick envelopes mean yes. Thin envelopes mean no. This one was practically bursting. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. The return address, Harvard College, Office of Undergraduate Admissions. The weight of it felt like possibility. I stood in the driveway of Gilbert Estate, March wind cutting through my jacket, and opened the envelope that would change my life. Dear Ms. Gilbert, congratulations! It is with great pleasure that I inform you of your admission to Harvard College, class of 2028. I stopped breathing. Furthermore, based on your exceptional academic record and demonstrated financial need, you have been awarded the Harvard College Scholarship, covering full tuition, room, board, and expenses for 4 years, a total value of $328,000. $328,000. 4 years at Harvard, everything I'd ever worked for, right there in my hands. I read the first paragraph again, then again. My eyes blurred with tears I refused to let fall. I'd done it. Against every odd, without any support, What's that? My father's voice cut through my joy like a blade. He was standing on the porch, home early from work, watching me with narrowed eyes. Before I could react, he was striding toward me, hand outstretched. Give it here. Dad, wait. He snatched the letter from my hands. His eyes scanned the page, and I watched his expression transform from curiosity to confusion to something I can only describe as rage. What the hell is this? Who gave you permission to apply to college? My father's voice was quiet. That was worse than yelling. When Richard Gilbert got quiet, it meant he was beyond angry. He was calculating. Dad, please, just look at it. Full scholarship, I won't cost you anything. That's not the point. He crumpled the edges of the letter in his fist. The point is you went behind my back. The point is you think you're better than your place in this family. My place? The words escaped before I could stop them. What place? Serving dinner? Marrying someone I don't love? His eyes went cold. Girls don't need degrees, Acacia. They need husbands. He turned and walked toward the house. I followed, pleading, bargaining, offering every argument I could think of. He didn't respond. He just walked straight to his home office, to the paper shredder beside his desk. Dad, please, please don't. He fed the letter into the machine. The sound it made, that grinding mechanical whir, I'll hear it for the rest of my life. I watched my future disappear into strips of confetti, $328,000 worth of opportunity turned into garbage. There. He brushed his hands together like he'd completed a minor chore. That's done. Now go help your mother with dinner. And don't ever do something this stupid again. I stood frozen in the doorway. My mother appeared behind me. I don't know how long she'd been there. Her eyes were red, her lips pressed tight, but she said nothing. She never said anything. My father walked past us both without another glance. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, I walked to my room, closed the door, and picked up my phone. I had one call to make. I sat on my bed and did the math. The deadline to confirm enrollment at Harvard was May 1st. That gave me 34 days. 34 days to somehow recover from what had just happened, to find a way forward when my father had literally destroyed my path. If I did nothing, I knew exactly what my future held. Bill Morrison's son, Derek. 28 years old, perpetually unemployed, with a smile that made my skin crawl. My father had been hinting about arrangements for months. Without college as an escape route, I'd be engaged by summer, married by fall, and trapped for the rest of my life. I thought about my mother. Susan Gilbert had been a nursing student when she met my father. 21 years old, full of dreams, top of her class. She dropped out to marry him, and she hadn't worked a single day since. Now she was 49, with no career, no savings of her own, and no voice in her own household. Was that my future? Silent dinners and empty days? Watching my husband dismiss our daughter the way my father dismissed me? I looked at my phone. Grandpa Harold's number was right there, saved under Grandpa H with a heart emoji. Legacy should go to those who deserve it, he'd said, not those who simply expect it. I didn't fully understand what he meant, but I understood that he was the only person in my family who had ever truly listened to me, the only one who had ever asked what I wanted, the only one who might help. I pressed the call button. It rang twice before he answered. Acacia? His voice was warm, curious. Is everything all right? I took a breath. Grandpa, I need to see you. Right now. Something happened. Come to the main house. Use the back door. Don't let anyone see you. He didn't ask questions. He just knew. I slipped out the back door of the guest house at 7:23 p.m., cutting through the garden to avoid the windows where my father might see. The main house loomed ahead, its windows glowing warm against the cold March evening. Grandpa Harold was waiting in his study, seated in his leather chair by the fireplace. He looked older than usual, frailer, but his eyes were alert. Sit down, he said. Tell me everything. So I did. The letter, the scholarship, the shredder. My father's words, girls don't need degrees, they need husbands, spoken like a verdict. Grandpa listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then, how much was the scholarship? $328,000, 4 years, everything covered. And he destroyed it. Yes. Another silence. When he spoke again, his voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. I built Gilbert Motors from nothing. 60 years ago, I was a mechanic with a dream and a $200 loan. I raised Richard to understand that hard work matters, that character matters. He shook his head slowly. I failed. Grandpa. No, let me finish. He leaned forward. I've watched your father for years. The way he treats your mother. The way he treats you. I kept hoping he'd change, that something would wake him up. But tonight... He trailed off, jaw tight. What can I do? I asked. The deadline is May 1st. I don't know how to fix this. We fix it together. He reached for the phone on his side table. I'm calling Eleanor Whitmore. She's the attorney who manages the family trust. She'll be here first thing tomorrow morning. The trust? Grandpa, I don't understand. You will. He met my eyes, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Cold, calculated determination. Your father made his choice tonight, now I'm going to make mine. Eleanor Whitmore arrived at 10 o'clock a.m. the next morning. She was a sharp-featured woman in her early 60s, silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than I was. Grandpa had told me she'd managed the Gilbert family trust since 1998, 26 years of legal expertise at his service. Miss Gilbert. She shook my hand with a firm grip. Your grandfather has told me what happened. I'm sorry. We gathered in Grandpa's study, him in his chair, me on the sofa, Eleanor spreading documents across the coffee table. Let me explain the situation, she said. The Gilbert Family Trust was established in 1978. It's what we call a revocable living trust, which means Harold, as the grantor, can modify the beneficiaries at any time during his lifetime. She pulled out a document. Currently, Richard is the primary beneficiary at 70%. That's approximately $8.6 million. Marcus and Tyler each receive 15%. And Acacia? Grandpa asked. Eleanor's expression tightened. Nothing. She was excluded when the trust was last updated in 2005. She glanced at me. Because she was female. The words hung in the air. I'd known, of course, but hearing it stated so plainly still stung. That changes today, Grandpa said. Draw up new documents. Acacia becomes the primary beneficiary, 70%. Harold, are you certain? Richard will learn that actions have consequences. Grandpa's voice was steel. Something I should have taught him 40 years ago. Eleanor nodded slowly. I can have the paperwork ready by April 12th, 3 days before your birthday party. Perfect. Grandpa turned to me. Your father's 80th birthday party. 87 guests. Every business partner, every board member, everyone he's ever tried to impress. A thin smile crossed his face. That's when he'll learn what his choices have cost him. I stared at my grandfather, seeing him clearly for the first time. He'd been planning something like this for years. He'd just been waiting for the right moment. "There's one more thing we need to address," Eleanor said, pulling another folder from her briefcase. "The Harvard situation." I'd almost forgotten. The shredded letter, the destroyed proof of my acceptance. Without documentation, how could I even prove I'd been admitted? "Harvard keeps records," Eleanor continued. "Your acceptance is in their system regardless of what happened to the physical letter, but you'll need to contact them directly to request a duplicate." "Will they send one?" "They deal with lost mail all the time. Explain that your letter was damaged, you don't need to go into details, and request both an email confirmation and a new hard copy." She wrote something on a legal pad and handed it to me. "Here's the admissions office number. Call Monday morning." Grandpa leaned forward. "Have them send the new letter here, to the main house, not to your parents' address." Smart. If another Harvard envelope showed up at the guest house, my father would destroy it too. "One more thing," Eleanor said, her tone careful. "Acacia, I want you to understand the legal implications of what's about to happen. When Harold changes the trust beneficiaries, Richard will lose approximately $8.6 million. That's not something he'll accept quietly." "I know. He may contest, he may threaten, he may try to manipulate your grandfather into reversing the decision." She looked at me steadily. "Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my mother's silence, my brother's indifference, my father's cruelty, 18 years of being invisible in my own family. "Yes," I said. "I'm prepared." Eleanor nodded. "Good. Then we proceed." She began gathering her documents. "I'll have everything ready for Harold's signature by April 12th. The announcement will be at the birthday party on the 15th. 3 days to prepare. 18 days since my future was destroyed. And now, a new future was taking shape. April 2nd, 2024, 9:15 a.m. I sat in Grandpa's study with my phone pressed to my ear, heart hammering as the line connected to Harvard's Office of Undergraduate Admissions. "Harvard College Admissions, this is Jennifer. How may I help you?" I'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, but my voice still trembled. "Hi, my name is Acacia Gilbert. I was admitted for the class of 2028, and I received my acceptance letter on March 28th. Unfortunately, it was damaged. I'm calling to request a replacement." "Of course, let me pull up your file." Keys clicked in the background. "Gilbert, Acacia? Yes, here you are. Congratulations on your admission and your scholarship award." The words hit me like sunlight. It was real. It was still real. "I can send a digital confirmation to your email immediately," Jennifer continued. "For the physical letter, we can expedite via FedEx. What address should we use?" I gave her Grandpa's address at the main house, spelling it carefully. "Perfect. You should receive the email within the hour and the hard copy within 2 business days. Is there anything else I can help with?" "Just one question." I gripped the phone tighter. "The scholarship, it's still valid?" "The deadline to confirm enrollment is May 1st, and I want to make sure—" "Absolutely. Your scholarship is fully intact, and your enrollment deadline hasn't changed. You have until May 1st to confirm." A pause. "Miss Gilbert, is everything okay? You sound worried." I almost laughed. Worried was an understatement. "Everything's fine now," I said. "Thank you. Thank you so much." I hung up and checked my email. Already there. A message from Harvard Admissions, subject line request for duplicate admission letter, Acacia Gilbert. I printed 2 copies. One went into Grandpa's safe, the other went into Eleanor's files. My father had destroyed my letter, but he couldn't destroy the truth. The 2 weeks between April 2nd and April 14th were the longest of my life. Every morning, I woke up in the guest house and pretended nothing had changed. I went to school. I did my homework. I helped my mother with dinner. I sat at the family table and listened to my father talk about the business, about Marcus's progress, about Tyler's latest academic adventures. He never mentioned Harvard, never mentioned the shredded letter. As far as he was concerned, the matter was closed. "You seem calmer," he said to me one evening, approval in his voice. "That's good. I knew you'd come around." I smiled and passed him the bread basket. 13 more days, I thought. 13 more days until you learn what coming around really looks like. The hardest part was watching him plan Grandpa's birthday party. He threw himself into the preparations with unusual enthusiasm, calling caterers, reviewing guest lists, practicing the toast he planned to give. "This is important," he told my mother. "Everyone who matters will be there. I need to remind them that I'm the one carrying on the Gilbert legacy." I noticed something interesting. The guest list kept growing. Originally, Grandpa had planned for about 50 people. But as the days passed, the number climbed: 60, 70, 80. By April 10th, it had reached 87. I mentioned this to Grandpa during one of our Sunday reading sessions. "Your father isn't the only one who can add names to a list," he said, a glint in his cloudy eyes. "I've invited a few people myself: business associates, board members, old friends from the country club." He paused. "I want everyone Richard has ever tried to impress to be in that room." "Why?" "Because when a man falls, the height of his fall depends on how many people are watching." I shivered. My grandfather was not a cruel man. But he was, I was learning, a strategic one. April 10, 2024, 4 days before the party. Grandpa called me to the main house to review the final guest list. We sat in his study, the same room where my future had been rebuilt, and he spread the names across his desk like a general planning a battle. 12 business partners from Gilbert Motors, he said, pointing. 8 board members. 15 from the Hartford Country Club. Eleanor will be there, of course, and the entire extended family. I scanned the names. These weren't just guests. They were witnesses. Every person my father had ever tried to impress. Every connection he'd cultivated over 30 years. "Grandpa," I said carefully, "are you sure about this? Doing it publicly, I mean. You could just tell him privately. Change the trust without the announcement." He looked at me with something like sadness. "I could. But your father has spent his entire life performing for these people, showing them what a success he is, what a leader, what a family man." His voice hardened. "They deserve to know who he really is, and he deserves to be seen." "What about Mom? Marcus and Tyler?" "Your mother will have a choice to make. As for your brothers," he sighed, "they'll keep their 15% each. They haven't done anything wrong. They just haven't done anything right either." He pulled out another document, a single page, handwritten. "This is my speech," he said. "For the party. I've been working on it for 3 days." I didn't ask to read it. Whatever he planned to say, I trusted him. "One more thing." He reached across the desk and took my hand, something he rarely did. "After the 15th, everything changes. Your father will be angry. Your family will be divided. Are you ready for that?" I thought about the sound of the shredder, the look in my father's eyes when he destroyed my future. "I've been ready my whole life," I said. "I just didn't know it until now." April 14th, 2024. 11:00 p.m. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard the soft knock on my door. My mother stood in the hallway, still dressed, her face pale in the dim light. She glanced over her shoulder, checking that my father's office door was closed, then slipped into my room. "Mom, what's wrong?" She sat on the edge of my bed, hands folded in her lap. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, "I know what you're doing with your grandfather." My blood went cold. "Mom, Don't." She held up a hand. "Don't explain. Don't apologize. I'm not here to stop you." I stared at her, trying to read her expression. My mother had been silent my entire life, compliant, obedient, invisible. I'd never seen her like this. "How did you know?" "I've been married to your father for 28 years. I know when he's about to lose something." A bitter smile crossed her face. "And I know when he deserves to." "Then why didn't you ever say something? Do something?" She looked down at her hands. Because I was afraid. Because I had nowhere to go. Because by the time I realized what my life had become, it felt too late to change it. She met my eyes, and I saw tears there, tears she'd probably been holding back for decades. I should have protected you, she whispered. When he tore up that letter, I should have screamed. I should have fought. Instead, I just stood there. Mom, I don't know if you can do this, she said. I don't know if your grandfather's plan will work, but I hope it does. She stood, moving toward the door. And whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know, I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. She left before I could respond. I didn't sleep that night. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear. I felt hope. April 15th, 2024. The morning of Grandpa Harold's 80th birthday. I woke at 6 o'clock a.m. after maybe 2 hours of sleep, my stomach tight with anticipation. Through my window, I could see the catering trucks already arriving at the main house, staff unloading tables and chairs and flowers. My father was in his element. He'd been up since 5, barking orders into his phone, reviewing every detail of the party he'd orchestrated. This was his moment. The moment he'd prove to Hartford's elite that Richard Gilbert was the rightful heir to the Gilbert legacy. He had no idea what was coming. Acacia! His voice echoed up the stairs. Get down here. I need you to help direct the florists. I pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, I'd change into my dress later, and went downstairs. My father stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing impatiently at me. The flowers go in the main house, not here. Show them where, and make sure you're presentable by 6. You'll be greeting guests at the door. Yes, Dad. He barely glanced at me. Smile, be polite, don't say anything beyond welcome and thank you for coming. Understood? Understood. I spent the morning as invisible as always, directing vendors, arranging centerpieces, staying out of my father's way. At 2 o'clock p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Grandpa. Everything ready. Eleanor arrives at 6 o'clock. Stay calm, trust the plan. I texted back a single word, ready. At 5:30, I went to my room to change. I chose a simple black dress, elegant but understated. This wasn't my night to shine. This was my night to watch. I looked at myself in the mirror. 18 years old, Harvard admitted, about to witness my father's world collapse. This is the last day I'll be invisible, I thought. The party started at 7 o'clock p.m. In 5 hours, everything would change. Gilbert Estate had never looked more beautiful. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across the main house's grand ballroom. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters in black vests circulated with champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres. White roses, Grandpa's favorite, adorned every table. And the guests. 87 of them, dressed in their finest, filling the room with the hum of polite conversation and expensive perfume. I stood at the entrance as instructed, greeting each arrival with a smile and a welcome to Gilbert Estate. Most barely acknowledged me. I was just the daughter, after all, practically part of the furniture. My father worked the room like a politician. He shook hands, clapped shoulders, laughed at jokes that probably weren't funny. Every few minutes I caught fragments of his conversations. Best quarter Gilbert Motors has ever had. My vision for expanding into Massachusetts. Carrying on my father's legacy, of course. His legacy. His vision. His success. Never mind that Grandpa Harold had built everything from nothing. In my father's telling, he was the architect of the Gilbert Empire. At 6:45, I saw Eleanor Whitmore arrive. She wore a charcoal suit and carried the same leather briefcase she'd had at our meeting. She caught my eye across the room and gave me the slightest nod. The documents were in that briefcase, signed, notarized, legally binding. At 6:55, I spotted Grandpa Harold making his entrance. He moved slowly, leaning on a cane, but his eyes were sharp. My father rushed over to help him to the seat of honor, a wingback chair positioned at the head of the room. "Dad, you look wonderful," my father said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. 80 years young. Grandpa smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I checked my phone. 7 o'clock p.m. exactly. The party had officially begun. And in less than 2 hours, it would become something no one expected. At 8 o'clock p.m., my father clinked a knife against his champagne glass. "If I could have everyone's attention, please." The room quieted. 87 faces turned toward him: business partners, board members, country club friends, family. The audience he'd spent 30 years cultivating. My father stepped into the center of the room, positioning himself between Grandpa's chair and the crowd. Classic Richard Gilbert, always making sure he was the focal point. "First, I want to thank you all for being here to celebrate my father's 80th birthday." Applause. Raised glasses. Harold Gilbert built something extraordinary with Gilbert Motors, a legacy that I've had the privilege of carrying forward for the past 20 years. I stood near the back, watching. My mother was beside me, her face carefully neutral. "When I took over as CEO in 2005, my father continued, we had 3 dealerships and 15 million in revenue. Today we have 6 locations and 47 million. He paused for effect. That's the power of vision. That's the power of leadership. More applause. I noticed some of the board members exchanging glances. I'm proud to say that the Gilbert legacy will continue with the next generation. He gestured toward my brothers. Marcus is already proving himself at our Farmington location. Tyler will join the business after graduation. The future of Gilbert Motors is secure. No mention of me. Of course. Dad. My father turned to Grandpa, his voice thick with practiced emotion. Everything I've accomplished, I owe to you. I hope I've made you proud. The room waited for Grandpa's response, the touching moment between father and son. Instead, Grandpa Harold slowly rose from his chair. Thank you, Richard, he said. But I think it's time I said a few words of my own. My father's smile flickered, just for a second. He had no idea what was coming. Before Grandpa could continue, one of the guests approached me. Margaret Collins, wife of one of Gilbert Motors' biggest suppliers, smiled warmly. Acacia, isn't it? I don't think we've properly met. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for coming. Such a lovely party. She tilted her head. Tell me, dear, what are your plans after graduation? College? I opened my mouth to respond, but my father's voice cut across the room. Acacia will be getting married. He'd heard. Of course he'd heard. He was always listening when it came to controlling the narrative. My daughter doesn't need college, he continued, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. Women in the Gilbert family have more important roles, supporting their husbands, raising families. He chuckled, looking around for approval. The traditional values that made this country great. A few uncomfortable laughs. Margaret Collins's smile had frozen on her face. Actually, my father continued, warming to his audience, Acacia had some silly notion about applying to Harvard. Can you imagine? He shook his head, playing the role of the patient, long-suffering father. I had to set her straight. Girls don't need Ivy League degrees. They need to know their place. The room had gone quiet. I felt 87 pairs of eyes on me, some pitying, some uncomfortable, some carefully blank. My father didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying himself. I handled it, he said, winking at a nearby business partner. That's what fathers do, guide their children toward appropriate futures. I didn't blush. I didn't look away. I met his eyes and thought, you have no idea what you just did. Because across the room, I saw Grandpa Harold's expression change. He'd been waiting for the right moment. My father had just given it to him. Grandpa stood. Richard. His voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. I think you've said enough. The room went silent. Grandpa Harold stood at his full height, still impressive despite his 80 years, and looked at his son with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Disappointment crystallized into resolve. "I'd like to say a few words," Grandpa said, "if you'll all indulge an old man on his birthday." My father's smile wavered. "Of course, Dad. The floor is yours." Grandpa moved slowly to the center of the room, positioning himself where my father had stood moments before. The crowd shifted, reorienting around him. 60 years ago," he began, "I was a 20-year-old mechanic with $200 and a dream. I built Gilbert Motors from nothing. Every brick, every contract, every relationship, I built it with my own hands." Murmurs of appreciation from the older guests who remembered those early days. "I raised my son to understand certain values: hard work, integrity, treating people with respect regardless of who they are." Grandpa paused. "I failed." The murmurs stopped. My father's face went pale. "Dad, what are you—" "I'm not finished." Grandpa's voice was steel. "Richard, you just told this room that your daughter doesn't need an education, that girls should know their place, that you handled her dreams of attending Harvard." The silence was absolute now. I could hear my own heartbeat. "What you didn't tell them," Grandpa continued, "is what handling it actually meant." He turned to face the crowd. "3 weeks ago, my granddaughter received an acceptance letter from Harvard College, a full scholarship, $328,000. Gasps, whispers, eyes darting between me and my father. "Richard took that letter," Grandpa said, "and fed it through a paper shredder, while his daughter watched." The whispers became a roar. My father's face had gone from pale to gray. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking, "this is a private family matter." "You made it public," Grandpa replied, "when you humiliated her in front of 87 people." Grandpa gestured to Eleanor Whitmore, who had been standing quietly near the edge of the room. "Eleanor, if you please." She stepped forward, opening her briefcase. From it, she withdrew a folder and handed it to Grandpa. "This," he said, holding up a printed document, "is an email from Harvard's Office of Undergraduate Admissions, dated April 3, 2024. It confirms my granddaughter's acceptance and her scholarship award." He handed it to the nearest guest, a board member named Thomas Wright, who read it with widening eyes. "This," Grandpa continued, pulling out another page, "is a duplicate of her acceptance letter, sent after Richard destroyed the original." The documents began circulating through the crowd. I watched faces change as people read them: shock, disgust, disbelief. "Eleanor," Grandpa said, "would you verify the authenticity of these documents?" Eleanor nodded. "I personally contacted Harvard's admissions office. These documents are genuine. Acacia Gilbert was admitted to the class of 2028 with a full scholarship valued at $328,000. My father lunged forward. "This is ridiculous. Dad, you can't possibly—" "I can." Grandpa's voice was ice. "And I will." He turned back to the crowd. "I built Gilbert Motors on the principle that a person's worth is measured by their actions, not their gender. My son has spent 30 years pretending to uphold those values while treating his wife and daughter like property." "Dad, please!" My father's voice had taken on a desperate edge. "This is a family matter. We can discuss this privately." "You had 18 years to discuss it privately." Grandpa looked at him with something like pity. "You chose to destroy your daughter's future instead." The room was utterly still. 87 witnesses to my father's unmasking. And Grandpa wasn't finished yet. "Eleanor," he said, "please read the relevant sections of the document I signed on April 12th. My father's face went white. Eleanor withdrew a final document from her briefcase, thick, official, bearing the seal of a notary public. "This is an amendment to the Gilbert Family Trust," she announced, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Executed on April 12th, 2024, and properly witnessed and notarized." My father took a step backward, as if the words were physical blows. "The amendment reads as follows," Eleanor continued. "Effective immediately, the primary beneficiary of the Gilbert Family Trust is changed from Richard Harold Gilbert to Acacia Marie Gilbert. The allocation is revised as follows. Acacia Marie Gilbert shall receive 70% of all trust assets. Marcus Richard Gilbert and Tyler James Gilbert shall each retain 15%, 70%, $8.6 million. The number hung in the air like a thunderclap. Richard Harold Gilbert, Eleanor concluded, is hereby removed as a beneficiary of the trust entirely. The explosion came immediately. You can't do this! My father's voice cracked, all pretense of composure gone. I'm your son! I've given everything to this family. You've given nothing, Grandpa replied quietly. You've taken from the company, from your wife, from your daughter. You've taken credit for work you didn't do and destroyed opportunities you didn't deserve to control. I'll contest this. I'll get lawyers. You can try. Grandpa's voice was weary now. But Eleanor will tell you that a revocable living trust can be modified by the grantor at any time. This is perfectly legal and perfectly final. I watched my father's face cycle through emotions, rage, desperation, calculation, and finally, something I'd never seen there before. Fear. He looked around the room at the people he'd spent 30 years impressing. The business partners, the board members, the country club friends. Every single one of them was looking at him like they'd never seen him before. Because they hadn't. Not really. Until now. My father turned on me. You! His voice shook with rage. You did this! You poisoned him against me! I met his eyes. For the first time in my life, I didn't look away. I didn't poison anyone, Dad. I told the truth. You made your own choices. Choices? He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. I was protecting you from wasting your life on some useless degree. Protecting me? The words came out calm, steady. You destroyed a $328,000 scholarship. You tried to sell me to Bill Morrison's son. You've spent 18 years telling me I'm worthless. I paused. That's not protection. That's control. He stepped toward me, and for a moment, I thought he might actually raise his hand, but Grandpa was there, stepping between us. Enough, Richard. This is my daughter. She's my granddaughter, and she's worth more than you ever gave her credit for. Grandpa's voice softened slightly. I wanted to believe you'd change, that you'd see what you were doing, but tonight, you stood in front of 87 people and bragged about destroying her future. I was trying to guide her. You were trying to own her. Grandpa shook his head. Just like you've tried to own everything. The company I built, the legacy I created, the family I raised. He looked at his son with profound sadness. I gave you everything, Richard, and you learned nothing. The room remained frozen. I could see guests whispering to each other, some already edging toward the exits. My father's carefully constructed world was crumbling in real time, and there was one more blow to come. There's something else, Grandpa said, about your living arrangements. My father's face, already gray, went ashen. What about them? Gilbert Estate belongs to me, including the guest house where you live. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. You have 30 days to vacate the property. The words landed like a physical blow. My father actually staggered. You can't. I've lived there for 20 years. On my property, in my house, by my generosity. Grandpa's voice was firm, but not cruel. That generosity has limits, Richard. You've reached them. Where am I supposed to go? That's no longer my concern. I watched my father's face crumble. He'd built his entire identity around Gilbert Estate, the address, the prestige, the proximity to power. Losing the trust was devastating. Losing his home was annihilation. Then something unexpected happened. My mother stepped forward. Harold. Her voice was quiet but steady. Steadier than I'd ever heard it. I'd like to stay, with Acacia, if you'll allow it. Every head in the room turned toward her. My father's expression shifted from despair to betrayal. Susan, what are you doing? She looked at him, really looked at him, for what might have been the first time in years. I'm choosing our daughter, Richard, something I should have done a long time ago. You can't be serious. After everything you've done? Her voice rose slightly. You've controlled every aspect of my life for 28 years. What I wear, what I say, who I talk to. You turned me into a ghost in my own home. She took a breath. I won't let you do the same thing to Acacia. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother, quiet, compliant, invisible Susan Gilbert, had finally found her voice. Grandpa nodded slowly. You're welcome to stay as long as you need, Susan. Both of you. My father looked between us, his wife, his daughter, his father, and seemed to realize, perhaps for the first time, that he was alone. Completely alone. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the party. No one tried to stop him. If you're watching this and thinking, I wish I had someone like Grandpa Harold in my corner, I hear you. Sometimes the people who should protect us don't. Sometimes we have to find our own champions, or become our own. Drop a comment and tell me, has anyone ever stood up for you when you couldn't stand up for yourself? And if you want to see what happened after that night, hit subscribe and stay with me. The story isn't over yet. The party didn't end so much as dissolve. Guests began leaving in small groups, murmuring apologies and well wishes to Grandpa Harold. Some paused to shake my hand. Brief, awkward acknowledgments from people who'd barely noticed me an hour ago. Congratulations on Harvard, Thomas Wright said, the board member who'd read the documents first. That's quite an achievement. Thank you. If you ever need a summer internship, give my office a call. He pressed a business card into my hand. We could use someone with your determination. Others followed. By the end of the night, I had 4 business cards and 3 internship offers, more opportunities in 2 hours than my father had given me in 18 years. Marcus and Tyler stood near the bar, looking shell-shocked. They hadn't said a word since the announcement. I wondered what they were thinking, whether they blamed me, blamed our father, or were simply too stunned to process what had happened. I'd deal with them later. Tonight wasn't about them. At 10:30, the last guests departed. The catering staff began clearing tables. The jazz quartet packed up their instruments. I found Grandpa Harold in his study, sitting in his leather chair, looking exhausted but peaceful. Grandpa, I knelt beside him. Are you okay? He took my hand in his. I should have done this years ago. I kept hoping Richard would change, that he'd see what he was doing. He sighed. I was a coward. You weren't, you? I was, but not anymore. He squeezed my hand. You're going to Harvard, Acacia. You're going to become something extraordinary. And no one, not your father, not anyone, is going to stop you. I hugged him then, this frail old man who had given me back my future. Thank you, I whispered, for everything. Don't thank me yet, he said. This is just the beginning. He was right. The hardest part was still to come. April 16th, 2024. 9:00 a.m. I sat in Grandpa's study with my laptop open, staring at the Harvard admissions portal. The cursor hovered over a single button. Confirm enrollment. 19 days ago, my father had destroyed my acceptance letter. 19 days of planning, waiting, hoping. And now, finally, I could make it official. Grandpa sat beside me, watching the screen with cloudy eyes that still saw everything that mattered. Go ahead, he said. It's yours. I clicked the button. The page refreshed. A new message appeared. Congratulations, Acacia Gilbert. You have confirmed your enrollment in Harvard College, class of 2028. Welcome to the Harvard community. I read it 3 times. Then I started to cry. Not the silent tears I'd learned to hide. Real tears, messy and loud, releasing 18 years of pressure I hadn't even known I was carrying. Grandpa put his arm around me. You did it. We did it. No. He shook his head. You earned this. The grades, the applications, the scholarship. That was all you. I just removed an obstacle. I laughed through my tears. That's one way to put it. We sat there for a long time, watching the confirmation screen like it might disappear if we looked away. Your grandmother would have been proud, Grandpa said finally. She always said the women in this family were stronger than the men. I didn't believe her until now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a delicate gold watch, antique with a worn leather band. This was hers. She wanted you to have it someday. He pressed it into my palm. I think today is that day. I held the watch like it was sacred, because it was. Thank you, Grandpa. Thank yourself, he smiled. Now go change the world. May 10th, 2024. I watched from my window as the moving truck pulled up to the guest house. My father had found an apartment in West Hartford, a two-bedroom unit in a complex that probably cost less per month than his country club membership. The fall from a five-bedroom house on a historic estate to a rental apartment must have been devastating. I didn't go outside to watch him leave. I didn't want to gloat, and I didn't want to give him the opportunity to say something that would ruin the fragile peace I'd found. But I did see him pause at the moving truck, boxes in his arms, and look up at the main house, at Grandpa's window. I couldn't see his expression from this distance, but I imagined it. The mix of anger and loss and disbelief that his father had actually followed through. He'd tried to contest the trust, of course. His lawyers had told him what Eleanor had already explained. A revocable living trust could be modified by the grantor at any time. There was no legal challenge that would succeed. He was out of options. My mother had filed for divorce on May 5th. Connecticut was a no-fault state, which meant she didn't need Richard's permission or cooperation. After 28 years of silence, she was finally free. Marcus and Tyler had chosen to stay with Mom. Temporarily, they said, until things settled down. I suspected they were hedging their bets, waiting to see which parent came out ahead. Old habits die hard. The moving truck pulled away at 3:47 p.m. My father didn't wave, didn't look back. 25 years in that house, and he left without a goodbye. I turned away from the window and went downstairs to help my mother make dinner. For the first time in my life, the guest house felt like home. I know a lot of you watching have been in situations where someone tried to control your future. Maybe it was a parent, a partner, a boss, someone who thought they knew better than you what your life should look like. If that's you, I want you to know your dreams are valid, your ambitions matter, and you don't need anyone's permission to become who you're meant to be. Hit that like button if this resonates with you, and stick around. There's more to this story, and I think you need to hear how it ends. May 20th, 2024, the Gilbert Motors board meeting. I wasn't there, but Eleanor told me everything. The board had called an emergency session after the party. Word had spread quickly through Hartford's business community. The CEO of Gilbert Motors had publicly bragged about destroying his daughter's Harvard scholarship. 3 major suppliers had already reached out to express concerns about company values. The meeting lasted 4 hours. By the end, Richard Gilbert was no longer CEO. They didn't fire him outright. That would have been too messy, too public. Instead, they created a new position, Senior Advisor, a title with no authority, no direct reports, and no seat at the executive table. Marcus was appointed interim CEO, with heavy oversight from the board. He was 24, inexperienced, and terrified, but he was also untainted by his father's scandal. The board's statement, released to local media, was carefully worded. Gilbert Motors is committed to values of integrity, respect, and equal opportunity. Recent events have prompted a leadership transition to better reflect these principles. Translation: Richard Gilbert had become a liability. 2 of the company's largest supplier contracts were renegotiated at less favorable terms, a combined loss of about $2.3 million annually. The Hartford Business Journal ran a small piece about the leadership shakeup, carefully not mentioning the party or the shredded letter, but everyone knew. In Hartford's tight-knit business community, everyone always knew. My father went from CEO to pariah in 35 days. He still had his salary, reduced, and his title, meaningless. But he'd lost everything that actually mattered to him: status, respect, control. I didn't feel triumphant when Eleanor told me. I felt tired. This wasn't revenge. It was consequences. There's a difference. My father had spent his whole life believing actions didn't have consequences, not for him, not for Gilbert men. He was learning otherwise. The ripples spread further than I expected. By June, my father had been quietly removed from the Hartford Country Club's board of directors. The official reason was time constraints due to professional transitions. The real reason was that no one wanted to be associated with him anymore. 3 families who'd been regular dinner guests for years stopped accepting invitations. Business partners who'd laughed at his jokes and praised his leadership now found reasons to be unavailable. Richard Gilbert, who had spent 30 years building a network of influence, watched it evaporate in 30 days. Meanwhile, my life was changing in the opposite direction. Thomas Wright's internship offer turned out to be genuine. His investment firm wanted me for the summer before Harvard. Real work, real pay, real experience. 2 other companies followed with similar offers. Mrs. Patterson, my English teacher, nominated me for a local scholarship for students who overcome adversity. I won $5,000 and a profile in the Hartford Courant's education section. The reporter asked me about my father. I declined to comment. "That's probably wise," she said. "But between us, I'm glad you got out." I was too. The strangest part was how quickly the narrative shifted. At the party, I'd been the invisible daughter, barely worth acknowledging. Now I was the Gilbert girl who got into Harvard, the one who stood up to her father, Harold's granddaughter, the smart one. I hadn't changed. My accomplishments were the same ones I'd had for years. The only difference was that now people were paying attention. It made me realize something important. I'd spent 18 years trying to earn my father's approval, trying to prove I was worthy of his attention. I'd been asking the wrong person. The people worth impressing had been there all along. I just hadn't known where to look. May 25, 2024. Marcus and Tyler asked to meet me at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory, away from the estate and all its complicated history. I agreed, though I wasn't sure what to expect. My brothers and I had never been close. They'd grown up in a different world than me, the world of Gilbert men, where everything was handed to them and nothing was expected in return. Marcus spoke first. He looked older than his 24 years, weighed down by a CEO title he'd never wanted and wasn't prepared for. "I wanted to apologize," he said. "For everything, I guess. For never saying anything when Dad treated you like that." Tyler nodded, staring into his coffee. "We should have stood up for you. We knew it was wrong. We just didn't want to rock the boat," I finished. "Yeah," Marcus sighed. "That's exactly it. And now the boat's capsized anyway, and we're all just floating." I considered my response carefully. These were my brothers. We shared blood, history, a last name, but we'd never shared understanding. "I don't need apologies," I said finally. "Apologies are just words. What I need is for you to be different, to treat women, your future wives, your daughters, your colleagues, like they're actual human beings." "We will," Tyler said quickly. "Don't tell me, show me, over years, not weeks." They nodded, chastened. "And Marcus?" I met his eyes. "You're CEO now. That means you set the tone. If I hear that Gilbert Motors is anything less than a place where women are respected and valued, I'll know you learned nothing from any of this." He swallowed. "Understood." We finished our coffee in awkward silence. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start. Some bridges take years to rebuild. I was willing to wait and see if they'd do the work. June 1st, 2024. My phone rang at 7:30 p.m. The caller ID showed my father's name. I almost didn't answer. But something, curiosity maybe, or a need for closure, made me pick up. Acacia. His voice was different, smaller. I wanted to talk to you. Okay? A long pause. I'm sorry. I waited. I'm sorry about the letter, about Harvard, about. He trailed off. About everything, I guess. Okay. That's all you're going to say? I chose my words carefully. Dad, I appreciate you calling, but an apology isn't just saying sorry. It's understanding what you did wrong. I know what I did wrong. Do you? Because what I heard just now was, I'm sorry about everything. That's not an apology. That's a blanket statement designed to make you feel better without actually acknowledging anything specific. Silence. You destroyed my future because I was born female, I continued. You told me for 18 years that I was worthless. You tried to sell me into a marriage I didn't want. And when I found a way out, when I earned something incredible entirely on my own, you literally shredded it. I was trying to protect you. No, you were trying to control me. There's a difference. More silence. I could hear him breathing, struggling to find words. I don't hate you, I said finally. But I don't trust you either, and I won't pretend everything's fine just to make family dinners less awkward. So what do you want from me? Space, time, and eventually maybe evidence that you've actually changed. I paused. Until then, I need distance. Acacia. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but my voice had been steady. That felt like progress. Some relationships can be rebuilt. Others need to be released. I wasn't sure yet which category my father fell into. August 15th, 2024. My room was covered in boxes, suitcases, and the accumulated debris of 18 years. I was leaving for Cambridge in 3 days, and somehow I still hadn't finished packing. My mother sat on my bed, helping me fold clothes that probably didn't need folding. We'd grown closer over the summer, two women learning to be themselves after years of being what someone else demanded. I found this in the attic, she said, holding up a small photo album. From when you were little. I flipped through the pages. Baby pictures, first days of school, a gap-toothed smile at age 7, holding a spelling bee trophy. You were always so determined, Mom said. Even then, I remember you teaching yourself to read at 4 because you were tired of waiting for someone to read to you. I don't remember that. I do. She touched my face gently. I should have protected that determination. Instead, I let your father try to crush it. Mom. No, let me say this. Her eyes were wet. I'm proud of you, Acacia. Not just for Harvard, or the scholarship, or standing up to your father. I'm proud of you for surviving, for becoming someone kind and strong despite everything we put you through. I hugged her then, really hugged her, the way I hadn't since I was small. Come visit me, I said. In Cambridge. See the campus. Meet my friends. I'd like that. Grandpa Harold appeared in the doorway, leaning on his cane. Room for one more? I waved him in. He handed me a small velvet box. Your grandmother's watch isn't enough, he said. This is for expenses, emergencies, whatever you need. Inside was a check for $20,000. Grandpa, I can't. You can, and you will. He smiled. Consider it an investment in the future. September 1st, 2024. I stood in front of the iron gates of Harvard Yard, suitcase in hand, heart pounding with a mixture of terror and joy. The campus was everything I'd imagined, and nothing like I'd expected. Red brick buildings older than my family's entire history in America. Students rushing past with coffee cups and laptops. The weight of centuries of scholarship pressing down like a blessing. 5 months ago, my father had fed my acceptance letter through a shredder. Now I was here. I touched the acceptance letter in my pocket. The duplicate, the one Harvard had sent to Grandpa's address. I'd had it laminated. Paranoid, maybe, but I never wanted to forget how close I'd come to losing this. My roommate was already in our dorm when I arrived, a girl from Oregon named Jessica with bright red hair and an infectious laugh. You're Acacia. Cool name. Where are you from? Connecticut. Nice. Long drive? Long journey, I said. You have no idea. That night, after unpacking an orientation and a dining hall dinner that felt surreal, I sat by my window and texted Grandpa, I'm here. I made it. His response came quickly. I knew you would. Now make it count. I looked out at the campus, the lights, the history, the promise of everything I'd worked for finally within reach. I thought about the sound of the shredder, the look in my father's eyes, the 18 years of being told I was worthless. And I thought about other people who had believed in me anyway. Mrs. Patterson, Eleanor, my mother, finally, and Grandpa, always. I was 18 years old. I was a Harvard student. I was the beneficiary of an $8 million trust. But more than any of that, I was free. For the first time in my life, my future was my own. So that's my story. The girl who was told she didn't deserve an education, the father who tried to destroy her future, the grandfather who gave it back. I won't pretend everything is perfect now. My relationship with my father is complicated. Maybe it always will be. My brothers are trying slowly to be better people. My mother is finding herself after 28 years of being lost. But I've learned some things along the way, things I want to share with you, whoever you are, wherever you're watching from. First, your value doesn't depend on someone else's approval. I spent 18 years trying to earn my father's respect. What I should have been doing was respecting myself. Second, sometimes the people who should protect you won't. That's not your fault, and it doesn't mean you're alone, it just means you have to look harder for your allies. Third, setting boundaries isn't betrayal. I love my father, but loving someone doesn't mean accepting their abuse. Walking away, or creating distance, is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. For them, and for yourself. I don't know what the future holds. I'm 19 now, finishing my freshman year at Harvard, studying economics and wondering what comes next. The trust fund is waiting for me when I graduate, $8 million that my grandfather believed I deserved. But the money isn't what matters. What matters is that I'm here, I survived. I became someone my 18-year-old self would be proud of. And if you're in a situation like mine, if someone is trying to control your future, diminish your dreams, make you feel small, I want you to know, it's possible to get out. It's possible to build something better. You just have to believe you're worth it. Because you are. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. Drop a comment and tell me yours. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more stories like this, subscribe and check out the video in the description. Until next time. That's my story. If you watched until the end, thank you. It means more than you know. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone who was supposed to love you unconditionally? How did you find the strength? Drop your story in the comments. And if this video helped you feel less alone, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. There are more stories in the description. Stories about finding your voice, claiming your worth, and building a life on your own terms. I'll see you in the next one.